Oh, hello again, everybody. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 2, Sound Too Furious. We're going to talk about William Faulkner. You might have guessed F. Scott Fitzgerald after the first episode, but he's not quite up in the pantheon where Faulkner is. So the connection with last week, Ernest Hemingway was a contemporary of Faulkner's, and very different style. Of course, Hemingway very direct, very accessible, even with the iceberg theory that we talked about, with some things being hidden. Faulkner is 3 levels up as far as complexity, and really at the highest level of complexity, but that's not going to stop us because it's worth diving into. I compare reading Faulkner to climbing the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. I will admit I have not climbed the Devil's Tower in the last 10 years. I didn't climb it in the other 45 years either, but also not in the last 10 years. But difficult, you got to probably be over 18 to do it, but worthwhile, and it is achievable. So we're going to jump into Faulkner. One of the things that Faulkner did that was comparable to Hemingway was a knowledge of the classics and the Bible, being classically educated, or at least well read, with references in titles such as Absalom, Absalom, Go Down Moses, and of course Hemingway had his For Whom the Bell Tolls, reference to Donne's poem, and Farewell to Arms, reference to an older poem, and anyway, The Sound of the Fury is of course a reference to Macbeth. I'll direct you to Act 5, Scene 5, and we'll do a little reading later on, but it's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, and signifying nothing. The Sound and the Fury is actually in 4 parts, and it's told by at least 2 idiots, maybe 2.5. The 4th section is an omniscient narrator, but the narrative structure is very difficult at first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use The Fast and the Furious as a comparison point to show how The Sound and the Fury and The Fast and the Furious franchise have certain things in common, as ways of sort of getting in and getting a little more accessibility. So the first thing is, of course, it's about family. Fast and the Furious franchise, the Toretto family, all our hijinks and adventures. Of course, The Sound and the Fury is about the Compson family, a in some ways decaying Southern family in Mississippi. The story is structured differently. We'll get to that in a moment. But decaying from at least their aspirations toward wealth and prominence, and sort of the story of things falling apart. Any story is about, any well-written story, and of course reality is about being or becoming. And there's a lot of becoming going on in this story for the Compson family. All right. The second aspect is shifting. Now, in the most literal sense, Fast and Furious has a lot of shifting, speed shifting, gear shifting. But I'm talking about time shifting. So in the Fast and the Furious, the events of Tokyo Drift, the 3rd movie, actually take place after, I think, the 5th one. So there's some time shifting going on. Han passes away. Spoiler alert. This is being filmed before Furious 9 comes out, in which Han returns. Also spoiler alert. So there's some time shifting going on there. Sound and the Fury is loaded with time shifting. It generally covers, across the 4 sections of it, a Holy Saturday, 1928, and then back to Good Friday, 1928, and then back to 1910, and then the 4th section is Easter Sunday, 1928. And even within the narration and the various sections, there are time shifts. We'll do a little reading from Quentin's section, the male Quentin, not Miss Quentin. There's also his niece, female with the same name. So there's time shifting that goes on around. And that brings me to the third point. And the third point is sometimes you just got to let a piece of art wash over you. So with the Fast and the Furious, sit back, enjoy the ride, literally. And in The Sound of the Fury, the first time you read through it, it's going to be very difficult if you haven't read it already. I kind of lucked into figuring out in college to read through it once and then I immediately reread it again, and in almost one sitting, I think. And that was a great move because getting through it the second time really added a lot. I've since read it 2 more times. Every time adds more to it. So it's worth getting into. Difficult, but a great payoff in being able to figure things out. And there are certain scholarly articles where they've even mapped out the time shifts, and so forth, which is, it's valuable to have that. It's good to see, and if you want to figure out exactly what's happening, but not necessary. So first time through, let it wash over you. Read it at a nice medium, slow pace. Generally, it's a book that warrants perhaps saying the words out loud in your head, or even reading it out loud if you can get away with that. The language is great. Just fantastic writing, and anyway, we will go to an excerpt of The Sound of the Fury right now. Maybe a pattern of blood. You could call that the one Christ was wearing. I found the gasoline in Shreve's room and spread the vest on the table where it would be flat and opened the gasoline. The first car in town, a girl, that's what Jason couldn't bear, smell of gasoline, making him sick, then got madder than ever because a girl had no sister, but Benjamin, the child of my sorrowful, if I just had a mother so I could say mother. It took a lot of gasoline, and then I couldn't tell if it was the stain or just the gasoline. It had started the cut to smarting. So when I went to wash, I hung the vest on a chair and lowered the light cord so the bulb would be drying the splotch. I washed my face and hands, but even then I could smell it within the soap stinging, constricting the nostrils a little. Then I opened the bag and took the shirt and collar and tie out and put the bloody ones in and closed the bag and dressed. While I was brushing my hair, the half hour went. But there was until the 3/4 anyway, except suppose, seeing on the rushing darkness only his own face, no broken feather unless 2 of them. But not 2 like that going to Boston the same night. My face hid his face for an instant. Across the crashing, when out of darkness 2 lighted windows, in rigid fleeing crash gone, his face and mine. Just I saw, did I see not goodbye, the marquee empty of eating the road, empty in darkness, in silence, the bridge arching into silence, darkness, sleep, the water peaceful and swift, not goodbye. I turned out the light and went into my bedroom, out of the gasoline, but I could still smell it. I stood at the window, the curtains moved slow out of the darkness, touching my face like someone breathing asleep, breathing slow into the darkness again, leaving the touch. Okay, that passage is from the Quentin section, and I misspoke earlier when I said the 1910 section is the 3rd section, it's the 2nd section, told by Quentin. Nevertheless, you can sense the time shifts in there if I read it well enough. I tried to change my voice a little bit for the time shifts that are evident in the text, and this book, The Sound of Fury, was written in 1929, and the same year as Farewell to Arms and All Quiet on the Western Front. It was quite a year. In 1922, James Joyce had written Ulysses, and this particular passage, the character of Quentin is reminiscent of Stephen Dedalus in Ulysses, but also Hamlet. But both works it all comes back to Hamlet. That's where we're headed over the course of this. That's a little highlight, I guess, or key. It all goes back to Hamlet, the play that contains everything. But Quentin is a Hamlet-esque character, contemplating and eventually committing suicide. And spoiler alert for a book written in 1929. but the present in that, at that time, 1910, the present narration by Quentin is him contemplating suicide, and then the flashbacks go back to earlier events that, of course, led up to that. But it's just peppered through his section. It's stream of consciousness, and that's the part where sometimes you just have to let it wash over you. The first time, the second time, figure out what's going on. You get a sense of it, especially when you get to the third and fourth sections of the book. It really opens up, and the clarity comes from seeing that. But anyway, that's why I selected that section, to show the stream of consciousness and the time shifts, and how and just the beauty of Faulkner's writing. Just a tremendous writer, possibly the greatest American writer. I really think so. So the novel was not popular when it was first published. It only sold, I think, 3,000. I think there were only 3,000, maybe 3,300 copies published in the first decade, and it did not become well known and more popular until after the next novel came out, Sanctuary. But even then, I think it was post World War II, because this was, of course, right on the cusp of the Depression, and might not have been the most uplifting read at the time. But after World War II, beginning in '46, it gained in popularity and prominence, and has become, of course, Faulkner's best-known work. Next week we'll jump ahead into something more contemporary, not completely present day, but a little more contemporary. That's also a great American writer. And then following that, jump around with some other things too.